Hi, this is Janie from Paper Compulsions. I'm going to be showing one of several cards that I made using the Bo Bunny Primrose paper collection. It's available at scrapadabadoo. I'll start out by cutting apart one of these cut-apart sheets that has the different sections for you. These are great for cards. I go ahead and cut up the entire sheet because once I've cut one out, I know I won't use the back side. So I have the sections cut apart so it's easier to use. And the one I'm showing about to cut right now is the one I'll use for this card. Now I'm scoring a piece of 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, scored at 5.5. And now I'm cutting down the inside card liners. I always put card liners inside my card just to make it a little sturdier, and I think it has a more finished look once you're done. I'm going to use Gathered Twigs Distress Ink and just ink the edges of the cardstock. Later I figure out that the walnut stain looks better, but for the edges of the card, this will be fine. I'm going to go ahead and keep the larger Tim Holtz foam applicator tools for edging inking the edges of my card. Here I have a brown panel that's going to go behind several layers, so I'm going to cut out the inside section of that panel to save and use for another card. It won't be seen, and so I just like to save some paper every now and then. I didn't quite cut apart at the corners, so I'm just using my scissors to clip the corner. And like I said, you'll never see that inside section. You just see the edges of this mat, and I'm going to ink the edges here. And I can use that inside piece later on another card. And there I'm just testing to make sure it looks right. I'm going to cut another mat out of the pink and white polka dot primrose paper. And I believe the brown mat was cut at 5 1/4 by 8 1/4, and this pink mat was cut at 5 by 8. And then I'll just look at that to see how I like it. And then once I commit to those layers, I'll go ahead and ink the pink portion. Now I'll just stack it all up here to make sure that I like this arrangement. And I've decided I want a little extra something, so I'm looking at the labels sheet, and I'm going to cut apart one of the labels there. I'm just placing it over to see how I like that. Here I've cut that, I fussy cut, or precision cut as Carol would say, the label out, and I'm just trimming the edges off because I'm just going to have the edges peeking out from behind the card, or behind that butterfly layer. And I go ahead and trim that top decorative cut plus a little bit of the brown layer right there, so that you have some brown showing through. And I'll just ink the edges that will be exposed. Later I decide that those pieces are too big and I'll adjust them. Just making sure I have the layers positioned correctly. And then I'll try these on the sides. Once I get these pieces on the card, I realize that it's too big, and if I tried to push them down, not enough of the detail would show. So I make some adjustments in just a few moments. It would look okay like that, but I wanted more detail to show, and I'm going to ink the edges with walnut stain. Oh, this is the butterfly. You can see where I precision cut the butterfly, but you see some of the white edges there. So I'm just going to ink those edges, and it's like the edges just disappear once you ink it, and it looks like it was supposed to be that way. And if I had switched to the small round applicator for this, it probably would have been easier, but I didn't think about it. There you can see where the edges are all inked, and I may have missed a few little spots here or there. So now I'm going to glue this together, but then I decide, here's where I decide to change those pieces. I'm just using wet glue because it lets me get the placement a little better, and then I'll decide to change it later anyway. These pieces will go on the left and right sides. I'm trying to get it in the center there. You could use a ruler, but I'm pretty good at judging small distances like that. And that looks very nice, but like I say, I decide to change it later because see how the top and bottom edges are hanging off the card at this point. So I decide to just trim that off where I still have that brown border, and I'll end up using those decorative pieces on the left and right side. So I've just trimmed that off where it still has that brown border. And these pieces are so nice, the paper is, that it doesn't really matter how you combine it, it's still going to look nice. Then I'll just ink those edges where the white was showing. And this is why I don't glue everything down or adhere everything down at first until I'm ready to put it all together. I may change it around and move it to see how I like it. I tried those at the top and bottom again, but you lose so much of the detail that I decided the left and right sides would be better. And then I'll just adhere all of that together. Here I'm using the ATG gun, and I'll put a little bit of wet glue, the Scotch Quick Dry adhesive, on the corners and edges. I like to do that to help keep the edges from coming up. And I'm also going around the edge where I cut and glued those other pieces on. just to reinforce that. And then I've turned that piece over and I'm putting adhesive on the back. And I'm going to lay it on top of the ink pad container while I put the bow on. I've put some adhesive on the back so that it will hold the ends of the ribbon when I curl them around. But I don't want all of it to stick down, so that's why I've placed it on top of the ink thing. And now that I have the ribbon on there, I'll go ahead and finish putting some adhesive all across the back of this panel. And it's stuck to my hand. And I'm putting a little bit of the Scotch quick dry glue on the edges and corners so they do not pop up later. And then you see this is the panel that I cut out the inside piece. I'll layer this on top and you'll never know that part of that is missing. And I'm laying that on top of the anti-stick mat, or the non-stick mat, because it still has some adhesive on it, and if it sticks down I can just peel it right up. And then I'll put it on the front of the card, making sure I have the edges even, have that centered. And here, I had the bow on earlier, but here I'm showing you how I did the bow. I tie a piece that will stretch across the front of my card. Then I cut another piece that's about that same length to use to tie on to the ribbon, or tie the ribbon together. Here I'm making a loop, and I'll zoom in a second. I've got a little tail there, and I've looped it around from underneath and up over my finger. And I'm going to hold it in the middle with my middle finger and thumb. And then I'm going to make another loop the same size on the other side. And I'm holding it in the middle. And there you can see where I've made that loop. Then I'll make a loop on this side that's slightly longer than that first loop. I'll do the same thing on the other side, making it slightly longer. I'm holding it in the middle. Then I'll come back and make a third loop. This one will be the same size as that second loop. And in just a minute I arrange those where you can see that very top loop was a little bit smaller and the two bottom loops are the same size. And I do the same thing for the other side, and I bring that over, and that's going to be the tail, so I cut it off. So in my hand right now I have the tail, the two small loops, and two large loops on each side. I'm going to lay this front down. What I've had facing up while ago will be the top of my ribbon. And then this is the piece that will go across the card, and then I'm picking up those other two ends, and that's how I'll tie it on there. I'll make a knot just to tie it all together, and I've gotten my loops confused, or the ends of my ribbon confused. There, I'm tying it together. Then I'll make one more knot just to secure it. And then in a minute I'll cut the ends off to make them pretty, but I'm making sure I have it laid correctly first. And I can adjust the loops by pulling on the strings. I'm just cutting the ends off to make it pretty. And then I have this piece that stretches across the card, and the bow can slide left or right on that ribbon. That way I can adjust the bow once I get it on the card. And apparently I had already skipped to the bow. This is a stamp I had made at Office Depot that says it's a handmade card created for you by Janie Lewis, and then it has my blog address on there. They're only like $5. They're self-inking. Well, they're not expensive. They're self-inking, and they're really handy. I have another one that I got from Custom Stamp Place that I ordered that was about $15. That's a wood-mounted red rubber stamp that's also great. I like to save some of the little bitty trim pieces that I get from my paper collection and put them across the edge of the inside of my card. And here I've got a brown piece, and I had a pink piece that wasn't quite long enough, so I just kind of tore it where I knew I would have a butterfly to cover it up. And I'm matching up the ends. And then in a minute, I will glue this to the inside liner of the card. And where there's a gap in that pink paper, I'll just glue a butterfly on top of that. Just like that. And I precision cut all of these one time. I did all the butterflies at the same time, and I guess I got a little butterfly happy when I was putting these on, because I put a lot on the inside. This one is at the very edge of the patterned paper when you cut it out, so it's missing a tiny bit of the wing, but I just act like it was planned to come up off the edge of the paper, off the edge of the liner like that, and I'll just trim the edges that hang over. I'll just trim those off. And there, you'll never know, but it was the very end of the pattern paper. Now I'm gluing this butterfly down. I'm going to be a little generous because with it opening and closing, I don't want it to be flapping around and get bent. And if I do a 3 butterfly collection like that, it's nice to either have them all the same size or have one large, one medium, and one small. And now I'm just picking some things up. Have the ATG gun, and I'm going to put adhesive on the backs of these liners. And that's the top, and that's the bottom that I have right now. Here I'm going to put the bottom liner in. And then I'll flip this liner upside down and line it up, and then close the lid to the card. And that gets your top liner positioned exactly even with the bottom one. And now I've decided that I want that butterfly that's on that panel to pop up a little bit. So I take the X-Acto knife and cut the wing so it pops up over that stamped image. I'm about to do the stamped image, but I want that butterfly wing to pop out. So I'll just take my craft knife, and it just cuts into that top layer, and there's 3 or 4 layers deep anyway, so it's not really going to damage my card. So I get it started, and I just want to cut away enough that my stamped image will tuck up underneath the wing, and I'm not hiding my butterfly. I found a stamp that is a Bo Bunny stamp from a few years ago, but it matches really well with this paper line also. I'm using the Memento, I think it's Rich Cocoa, and just wiping off on my Fiskars stamp press where I might have gotten some stray ink. And I'm stamping off on a scratch sheeted paper just because I haven't used this one in a while. And this stamp is designed to be distressed a little bit, and that's fine. I will go back and fill in some of the missing lines with a pen. So I'm just going to stamp this. And I'll go back and just wipe the stamp off with a baby wipe, and then I put it back on the plastic sheet. And then for the middle there, I want to put happy birthday. There I'm showing you the stamps. And they go just perfect with this line. I think it was from Ambrosia line, I don't remember. I want to use happy birthday, but I didn't have a stamp that had happy and birthday on the same line. So I took one that had it stacked, where happy was on top and birthday was on bottom, and I cut it apart. And I know some people may be scared about that, but you can cut it apart and position it the way you want to. And then if you want to have it stacked, it just goes back together very well. Fits very neatly to stack it again, and you have the right placement. I'm just making sure I have the two words lined up evenly. Then I'll ink that and stamp it in the middle section there of that label. I'm using just an inexpensive craft foam sheet that I got from the craft store. And there I'm showing you where it's two pieces. And then that's how it came stacked together like that. When you stamp onto foam, it gives you a little cushion so you get a more detailed stamp, especially if you're using the clear stamps like this. And then I wanted to add a little color, so I'm taking some of my Tim Holtz Distress markers, and first I'm taking the fine tip and filling in some of those missing lines. And then I'll go back with a few other colors and add a touch of pink to parts of the label that I'll show later. There you can see where I've added a little bit of pink. I've used some stickles on the butterfly and around the edges. This card needed to have a low profile, so I kept it as flat as I could. There's the finished card, and here's some more cards that I've used these same cut apart sheets to make. I'll have videos showing these other cards on the scrapadabadoo Crafts YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.